5 years since my brother Mike had died. The vast majority of you knew my brother Mike. Mike grew up in this church, and it's just a big reminder. The people who go before us, and we go before other people. Whenever we die, we leave a legacy. And so the question that I want to leave you today is, what legacy are you leaving? As we walk through this life, I learned that a lot of times we really spend our time focusing on things that don't matter. We waste a lot of time. We worry about things that we shouldn't worry about. We argue about things that we probably shouldn't argue about, things that don't really matter. And so my question is, what legacy are we leaving behind? What legacy are we leaving behind? This has been a trying year for all of us. People have gotten sick. Economy came to a grinding halt. A lot of people have lost jobs. We have millions of people unemployed. We have businesses that have closed permanently because they could no longer pay bills. We had livelihoods yanked out from underneath families. So the question is, what message would you give people right now? What would be the message that you give people in a world where fights are breaking out, literally? We're seeing fist fights, people just getting angry. I was just interviewed by CBN News this past week. A reporter reached out to me, and she said, I want to get your perspective because we're seeing levels of abuse increasing like we've never seen before. They're going off the charts, and every advocate that I talk to is really worried about it. Do you think that these statistics are accurate? And I said, absolutely they are. We're seeing it, we're feeling it. One newspaper called it a pressure cooker environment. When people are strapped financially, everybody's locked up in each other's homes. We're not allowed to go certain places. We have all these requirements for when you do go places, and people are starting to get angry. They're getting restless, they're getting angry. And so when we live in a world where we see increasing paganism, we see moral decline, we see abuse on the rise, we see suicide rates going through the roof right now. We see cyberbullying going through the roof right now. What would your message be? We're going to look at Isaiah. If you have your Bibles, open them up to Isaiah 55, and I'm actually going to back up to a few verses prior to where Victor began to read. Isaiah's preaching, as we mentioned last week, at a time where people are just distraught. He's preaching just prior to the fall of the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom fell in 722 BC to the Assyrians. The reason they fell is because people just were crazy. Israel had become extremely pagan. People were rearing their kids in a hostile environment. Oppression was through the roof. People were poor. They certainly weren't taking care of the poor. There were people living in the streets everywhere. Persecution was a very real threat for the Israelites, and it was their fellow brothers and sisters who were doing it. It was a really incredible, difficult time for people to rear children in this environment. And so the question that I asked you is a question that I would ask Isaiah. Isaiah, if you were preaching to that community, and he was, what would your message be? And over and over and over and over again, Isaiah warned the people and said, you need to turn so that God doesn't punish you. This is what's going to happen if you don't turn around. You've got to fix your eyes on God. You've got to repent. You've got to turn around. But Isaiah didn't just warn. Isaiah also offered hope. Isaiah gave a message of hope to a people who are struggling. There was a small remnant in Israel. There was a remnant of people who were faithful to God. They were people who They were trying to raise their children in a very pagan environment. And believe me, it was a minority. There was a small group of people who were faithful to God. The rest of the people were worshiping idols and worshiping other gods, and some were even sacrificing their children. I know that abortion is a hot topic right now, but these people are sacrificing their live children. The god of Moloch, or the god Moloch, was a detestable god, and it required people to sacrifice their children in the flames. People were doing this in Israel. In class today, I said I can't begin to imagine raising our children in an environment like this, that's this pagan, where, we have enough worries today. I know that parents often worry about rearing their children in today's environment, but I look at the environment in Isaiah's day, and it was absolutely horrific. So what was Isaiah's message to people, and what legacy was he calling people to leave behind? Isaiah 55, starting in verse 1, he said, "Come, everyone who thirsts. Come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price." Guys, this was a message to the people who were dying of poverty. Right now, in the midst of this, the shutdowns and, a disease pandemic that swept the world, homeless populations in major cities are increasing like crazy. There are cities that they don't know what to do right now with all the homeless population. They're everywhere. This message is a message that was applicable in Isaiah's day, and it's applicable today. Come, everybody who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come eat, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Verse 2, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves with rich food. We talked about that in class. What are the things that we prioritize? What are the things that we value right now? Isaiah is saying, why waste your money on things that aren't food and aren't drink and they're not necessary for life? Why spend your money? Why waste your money on that stuff? If we look around the world, we are absolutely one of the most wealthy nations in the world. And I look oftentimes at the things that I spend money on, and I'm not a big spender. I'm not a hoarder. I don't like to buy things. And I still look and say, I'm still spending money on things that don't matter. This is a powerful message that Isaiah is giving to the people. And what he's saying is, you look around, there are poor people everywhere. There are people in the streets who are starving. Why are you wasting your money on things that don't matter? Feed these people. Verse 3, incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live. And I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for the peoples. Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to, because of the Lord your God, and of the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. And then we'll pick up in verse 6 where Victor began to read. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. Guys, this is a message that's so important, because what Isaiah is saying is, in a pagan environment that he's preaching in a pagan place where people are sacrificing their kids in the fire, people were losing their minds. Oppression was high. Poverty was high. No doubt suicide was high. These were issues that Isaiah was facing in his day, and he's telling the people, turn right now before it's too late. God is a God of compassion. God is a God who cares. God is a God who will pardon you if you turn. And I think our message today and the legacy that we need to leave behind is to beg people to turn to things that matter. Our message needs to be that parents who are raising their kids in an environment today, instead of worrying and saying, my goodness, we need to shield our kids and we need to protect them and bring them into our home and we need to isolate them, we need to say, how do we teach our kids and train our kids to go out and to be a blessing to other people? How do we teach our kids to prioritize their money? How do we teach them to use their money for that which matters? How do we teach them to feed people who are hungry? How do we teach them to give water for those who thirst? How do we teach our kids to go out and to witness poverty that's out in the streets and to be kind and compassionate? Guys, there are so many keyboard warriors right now. And I worry about bullying. The online bullying, cyberbullying is crazy. I worry about people who are so focused on self-image. I worry about people who are crying out or trying to cry out and they have nowhere to turn. I worry about that stuff and I wonder, are we parents sitting down and talking with our children, and are we telling them that there's a better, brighter future? Are we giving them hope? Are we giving them this message that Isaiah is giving the people, saying, look, we need to just turn to God and just live our lives for Him? That all these other things that we think matter don't really matter. We need to look and fix our eyes on Jesus. We need to treat people with compassion. We need to give God our all. We need to focus on Him. We need to focus on Christ. We need to fall down and bow down and worship Him. We need to humble ourselves before God. We need to admit whenever we're wrong. We need to right our wrongs. Is that the message that we're giving people? Or are we trying to win arguments online? Right? Verse 8, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Guys, he's preaching this message to a people who were desperate. They were clinging on, holding on to a thread. People were dying in the streets. People were suffering. And Isaiah has given them this message of hope. He's saying you need to repent, you need to turn to God. God is a God of compassion. God is a God who will clothe you. God is a God who will feed you. God is a God who will care for you. God is a God who will pardon you. And guys, that is the Christian message. When was this? Yesterday? I talked to a very good friend of mine who I called him up, and we've been trying to connect for a while. And we finally connected. I called him, and he said, "I just wanted to talk to you." He said, "Not from a therapeutic perspective. I want to talk to you from a Christian perspective, as somebody who I respect." He said, "Right now, I'm on the verge of just renouncing Christianity altogether." He said, "I'm watching the way that Christians are behaving online in light of all of this stuff that's going on right now." And he said, "They're just so mean." He said, "They're doing it in the name of God, and I don't want any part of that." He said, "What do you say to that?" And I said, "What I say to that is that people are people. The world is made of people, and Christians are not perfect. And there are a lot of really ridiculous people who have ridiculous arguments, and you need to prioritize and realize that God doesn't get caught up in all these dumb arguments. And we need to guard ourselves and make sure that we're not being that person that's turning other people off to Jesus because we want to win an argument." That would be my message. My message would be Isaiah's message, that there's hope. My message would be Isaiah's message, that people need to turn to God. My message would be Isaiah's message, that God is a compassionate God, that God listens to people and sees people who suffer. And God reaches into their world and He pardons them and He lifts them up out of that and He feeds them and He clothes them. That's who God is. God is not this God who's just folding His arms and saying, you guys are messing it up again. God's calling us to turn to Him. God's begging us, God's pleading with His people to turn to Him before it's too late. God is a God of compassion. And I think that's the message that we need to be giving people right now in the midst of a pandemic, when people are desperate and people are tired and people are poor and people are worried about their kids and the environment that they're raising them in, and people are worried about cyberbullying, and people are worried about depression and isolation and all these things. We need to be giving them messages of hope. We need to be telling them that God is watching, God is listening, God is giving and extending compassion to you because God cares. I have to think how hard it would be for Isaiah to preach in his day. And like I mentioned last week, Isaiah was not packing places full of people. They weren't raising their hands to Jesus, Isaiah was preaching at a time when nobody was listening. They didn't have time for Isaiah. They thought Isaiah was a nut. But he preached anyway. He persevered. He went forward and he still gave messages of hope when I think he probably didn't have much gas left in his tank. For decades, Isaiah preached and he preached and he preached and he warned and he promised and he encouraged, and people just walked by him and acted as if he didn't exist. I think so many times we are shifting our perspective to where we want something back. We're like, if I'm not getting something out of Christianity, well then, I don't want anything to do with it. And I think, no, that's not really the right perspective. The right perspective is to leave a legacy of hard work where we bless people and we encourage people. And when people are lonely and desperate and they're crying out for help, that we stop everything and we give them attention and we listen to them and we love them and we embrace them and we care for them, because probably not many other people are. And I want to encourage you this week to go out and find people and bless people. Don't just make tomorrow about flipping burgers and spending time with your family, though those things are good. We need to really remember people, and we need to bless people. Teach our kids the value of blessing people, and let them bless people. Don't do it for them. Let them bless people. We've got to teach and train and instruct. What legacy are you leaving behind? If there's anybody this morning who's not yet taken that step to put Christ on in baptism, or anybody who has prayer needs, we'd encourage you to come up, or one of our shepherds will be in the back. We have Bob and Tess traveling this week. You can go back and share prayer needs, and we will certainly pray for you as we all stand and sing together.